Welcome to the debate. Today we are tackling what has really become the central tension of the U.S. economy, the widespread and, frankly, immediate integration of AI and automation into core industries. This isn't a future trend anymore. It's the defining strategic factor for big tech, for finance, logistics, retail. These corporations are redesigning their entire operating models around machine intelligence as we speak.
Indeed. And the material we're looking at forces us to confront this really critical divergence in how we interpret this whole shift. The question is, does the evidence of all this pain we're seeing, this very visible cycle of job reduction, of displacement, does that represent AI's primary threat to labor? Is this the so-called jobless growth? Or is all this pain just, a necessary short-term side effect of a much bigger and ultimately beneficial structural transformation of human skills? And that's the core of it. I'm going to argue that the overwhelming current data points to tangible displacement. It points to job destruction. Our primary observation has to be this corporate rush for efficiency, which is translating one-to-one into a reduced headcount. So my position is simple. The immediate impact is job loss. And I'm going to argue that what we're seeing primarily reflects a forced, let's call it a structural evolution.
The energy of the labor market isn't being reduced, it's being radically redirected upward. AI is getting rid of the drudgery, the repetitive work, and it's demanding that human labor pivot towards supervision, strategic thinking, and high-level creativity.
I see why you think that. And I get the focus on the potential long-term destination. But let me ground my perspective in what's happening today, in the observable economic reality. The most pressing characteristic of the U.S. labor market right now is AI-driven displacement, and it's evidenced starkly by a phenomenon we have to define very clearly: jobless growth. This is the measurable reality where companies boost their output, their revenue, their profit, all while keeping their headcount flat or, more often than not, cutting it.
That's an accurate description of the phenomenon, yes, but not necessarily its meaning.
Oh, I think the meaning is in the mechanism and the intent behind it.
Look at the foundation of the U.S. job market, office and administrative jobs. This sector historically employed millions, providing stable middle-class pathways. The material shows this is the sector being hollowed out first, and we're not talking about small adjustments here. We're talking about mass disruption for roles like data entry, administrative assistants, payroll processors. The mechanism is clear. It's a robotic process automation, RPA, hooked up with predictive AI. It just executes all that manual data work and replaces dozens of human procedures with a single automated workflow. For the person who held that job, that is not a transformation. It's a displacement event, driven explicitly by cost reduction targets to please shareholders.
I come at it from a different way. We have to acknowledge the pain of displacement. It's real, it's immediate. I'm not denying that.
But focusing only on the loss of these rote administrative roles, it obscures the bigger tectonic shift happening underneath. The job structure isn't just shrinking, it's polarizing, it's elevating. AI eliminates repetitive work, and that creates a vacuum that has to be filled by humans operating at a higher cognitive level. The focus shifts to skills that are still uniquely human: nuanced judgment, emotional intelligence, complex problem solving. The material is very explicit on this point. AI isn't just taking jobs, it is fundamentally changing skill requirements and merging multiple roles into one. It's an evolution, and the lowest common denominator tasks are simply being retired.
But those merged roles mean fewer people are getting paychecks. That's the immediate economic damage.
It means fewer people are employed in low-value tasks. Look at the tech sector itself. We see cuts in junior development, in manual QA, basic coding. You frame that as destruction, I see it as consolidation, driven by sophisticated LLMs. A single senior engineer augmented by tools that can handle routine debugging and generate boilerplate code, that one person can now do the work that used to require 2 junior engineers and a QA specialist. That's not net destruction, it's an elevation of the baseline skill required to be a coder. The jobs that are left are more strategic. They're focused on architecture, on security, on novel problems. And that's the long-term benefit here. The best ideas emerge from rigorous challenge, and this pressure is forcing the workforce to evolve.
Okay, let's get into that core disagreement, specifically around jobless growth. I maintain that this phenomenon is the single clearest indicator of net job destruction that is economically harmful to the labor force as a whole.
I acknowledge your focus on the raw number of paychecks, but I would frame jobless growth very differently. It's fundamentally a measurement of increased efficiency. It is not in itself evidence of a societal or an economic failure. Optimization is the goal of innovation. I mean, if AI enables a massive logistics firm to increase its shipping throughput by 20% with automated sorting robots and route optimization, and they do that while cutting their warehouse staff by 10%, well, that company has successfully reallocated capital and human energy. That human labor is freed up and ideally forced to shift toward areas where complexity demands judgment, like managing a global supply chain. The key insight we miss when we focus only on headcount is that AI doesn't take jobs, it takes repetitive jobs. The economy has to adjust to that new productivity curve.
But that adjustment has dire consequences right now. When you say human labor is being freed up, you're using a euphemism for unemployed. Just look at retail. The rise of self-checkout, of fully automated inventory systems. These allow stores to handle higher volumes with far fewer cashiers and stocking staff. So when a company boosts its shareholder value through that efficiency, but doesn't replenish those jobs with new, accessible roles, the market is demonstrating a systemic failure. It's failing to create work at the necessary pace. That's why it feels like destruction. The jobs are just vanishing from the economy's entry points.
I understand that perspective, but we have to resist the urge to halt progress because of immediate, frictional unemployment. We've seen these shocks before: the mechanization of agriculture, the move from switchboard operators to automated telephony. In every single one of those cases, the work that was lost was low value, and the resulting economic boost eventually created new, completely unanticipated opportunities. To frame jobless growth as a failure is to argue against the very idea of optimization. If the work can be done better, faster, and cheaper by a machine, why should a human be obligated to do it? The focus has to be on facilitating the transition, not preserving an obsolete work structure.
Silica invitrization is precisely where your argument breaks down for me, and it leads directly into the immediate social cost that's identified right in the source material. We're seeing deep anxiety about professional stability, this immense pressure to constantly upskill, and two critical groups are suffering specific difficulty.
You're referring to the mid-career worker and the new graduate.
Exactly. Take the mid-career worker, maybe an experienced administrative manager whose entire value was built on mastering complex but ultimately repetitive procedures. Our material notes these workers find it hard to transition because their deep expertise is now handled by an algorithm. They're too specialized for low-skill work, but they lack the technical baseline for the strategic roles you're talking about. They're just displaced, with no clear path forward. That's a massive loss of human capital. I acknowledge the profound anxiety about professional stability, and the difficulty for mid-career individuals is real. It's probably the most painful part of this whole transition. But the difficulty is one of adaptation speed, not malicious displacement. If a paralegal's work in contract review is automated, that person has a choice: leave the field or leverage that same AI to focus on complex legal strategy and client relations. The market is demanding a pivot from process management to strategic thinking. The pressure is necessary. Failing to learn these tools means falling behind. But what about the other group, new graduates? By automating away those crucial entry-level roles, the junior developer, the basic content writer, AI is destroying the first rung of the career ladder. How is a young worker supposed to get the experience they need to reach those elevated strategic roles if the jobs that provide that very experience are just gone? You need time and repetition to develop judgment, and AI is removing the need for that repetition.
I agree the difficulty for new graduates is acute, but I frame it differently. It's not displacement so much as a radically shifted minimum requirement. The ladder hasn't been destroyed, the first rung has just been raised, significantly. Expertise in using AI tools is now the entry-level baseline. We see this in content creation. A new graduate today isn't hired to write 50 basic blog posts. They're hired to be a prompt strategist who can manage and deploy generative AI. That requires immediate competency. The market is selecting for those who, as the material says, know how to use AI will have a huge advantage. They aren't starting at zero. Their starting point is AI literate.
I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning because it ignores the sheer numbers, the quantitative reduction. Those jobs that are disappearing, data entry, administrative assistants, customer service agents, they represented millions of workers. Their disappearance is pure quantitative reduction of opportunity. It's not some guaranteed upward transformation for the majority of people who held them. And on top of that, we're seeing this tactic of silent layoffs. Companies just freeze hiring, they let attrition do the work, while AI immediately shoulders the majority of the workload. That confirms displacement is the intentional cost-saving outcome, not just a side effect of some hopeful upskilling.
Let's look more closely at the creative sectors, though. Even there, in content and media, the impact isn't necessarily mass firings, but an intense consolidation of capabilities. This shows AI acting as a profound multiplier.
Okay, but detail that multiplication for me. Well, think about a modern marketing department. Before, you might have needed a dedicated SEO specialist, a social media assistant, and a copywriter for basic ad text. 3 people. Now, one highly skilled content strategist, leveraging large language models for drafts, predictive analytics for keywords, and automated scheduling. They can achieve exponentially more output.
This just reinforces my thesis. AI pushes human labor towards high-level creativity and strategic integration. It's augmentation that drives massive innovation and economic value.
And I challenge that interpretation of augmentation as being good for the labor market. While one person now does the work of 3, that is still a 66% job loss from a pure headcount perspective. We can't ignore that. The outcome for the broader labor market is a massive reduction in the number of paychecks for that same volume of work.
Even if the one remaining job is more interesting, the structural change you're describing is fundamentally dependent on displacement happening first. The change is enabled by the pain of job destruction. I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that.
Let me tell you why. We must not confuse painful, necessary transition with net economic harm. That is a failure of historical perspective. The pain we see today, the loss of these repetitive jobs, is the mechanism by which the economy sheds low-value work. Focusing only on the lost headcount obscures the fact that the cost of creating new, high-value services is dropping dramatically. Human capital is being redirected towards supervising algorithms and defining strategic objectives. The goal is to move beyond tasks that are just process-driven. But that movement isn't guaranteed.
A displaced worker becomes an economic burden, and concentrating all the value in high-level roles creates a widening skills gap, making the economy potentially less resilient, not more. The economy, by definition, has to chase efficiency. The role of policy and education is to meet that chase with rapid upskilling, not to try and preserve the old structure. The market has spoken. AI is here, and it is prioritizing high-level human judgment. So to summarize my position, the immediate measurable evidence, the prevalence of jobless growth, these silent layoffs as a strategy, the concentrated cuts in huge sectors like administration and retail, it all paints a picture where displacement is the dominant current effect. And this is creating significant social and psychological strain on the workforce. And critically, it's dismantling the career ladders that are essential for new and mid-career workers.
We cannot prioritize a speculative future benefit over verifiable present-day harm.
And my counterposition remains that the displacement, though undeniably painful, is the mechanism for a larger, necessary structural transformation. AI is effectively eliminating the need for human attention on repetitive tasks. It's forcing that attention toward higher-order strategic decision-making and supervision of these automated systems. This shift to a much higher baseline of skill is the defining long-term trend that will ultimately yield a more productive and strategically focused job structure.
It's clear that AI is fundamentally altering the U.S. job market at a blistering pace. And while we disagree on whether the primary effect right now is displacement or simply the cost of transformation, Understanding the nuance between those two perspectives is absolutely critical for figuring out how to navigate what's ahead.
Absolutely. The evidence provides strong support for both narratives, the economic benefit of efficiency and the social cost of that transition. It really underscores the complexity of trying to measure this kind of economic change in real time. We have to keep examining the material from both sides to truly grasp the future of work.